Okay, so centrality. So this has got a long history in social networks, and which is sort of starts in the 1930s as a field, and is kind of not really sort of looked down upon by the rest of sociology for a long time, but turns out to have been a big thing. So we'll talk about, that's a very simple basic one, which is just like how many friends do you have, but then we'll get to these more complicated ones that people have used. This is really behind, say, Google originally. Okay, so let's try to sort through these things. Yeah. I really want to talk about Google and Facebook, but I'll stop. Okay, so, right, so, and this is, if you've been through POCs, you know about this whole thing about influentials being something we can't help ourselves talk about and think about. It's very natural, it's a very simple story, right? There's one person that changed everything in the whole system, so that makes for an easier thing historically, and kind of going forward, it's better to be able to understand that there's just this one person. If we can influence them, then everything will change. So there's a bit of a focus like that here, and we'll move away from being just this one person, but it's a bit of a trap, right? So how important is a node in a network? And it depends what's going on, right? So it could be that they're something that handles a lot of traffic, could be an edge, right? So these are clearly things. And you'll see some, natural work with transportation system is to take out one edge and see what happens, right? We're sort of alluding to that with Bree's paradox, but just take out an edge, just say there's, road work, or, there's a moose got in the road, or whatever it was, and let's see how the thing functions now, right? Same with power grids. Let's break something and see what happens. We had a whole bunch of work years ago on organizations. If links fail, what's going to happen with message passing and problem solving. So, but a simple way to approach that would be, let's just go and find the first most important one, right? We'll just say, by some measure, this is the most important edge. And then maybe we'll just do this greedily, right? We'll take that out, and then we'll study that thing again and take that edge out again. The next most important edge. But it could be that the two most important edges to take out becomes a combinatorial problem, right? If you want to choose the three most important edges and take out three at a time and study it, right? Then it's an n choose three, well, m choose three, where m is number of edges. That explodes. So it's a difficult problem. And it can be that small edges matter, right? So it could be bridges. They could be things that hold two parts of the network together. So we're going to see this kind of come through into the next section, which is about structure detection, which is an enormous field, right? It's community detection. How do you find the structure in your system? And generally we're thinking about networks, but this is a broad problem. We've got some big system it's a big mess in terms of our representation of it. Does it have some group structure? How do we find that out? Unbelievable amount of work's been done on it, and we'll just see that some of this stuff goes through into there in terms of helping. Not obvious how that's going to work, but we'll get there. So it could be that they're, of course, a source, right? So there's some nice work in the past using basically PageRank to look at Supreme Court decisions. So it's more important than just saying which decision is the most cited or the one that cites the most. That would be a very sort of simple, easy thing to look at to start with. I mean, it's certainly how we rank papers, right? Citation counts. We don't care about how many they cite, I suppose. Although there are efforts to use that as a measure of creativity, right? So the person who has the most outward citations relative to their inward the ones they cite, so this is going to help for going further back, because now you cite everyone you can. Einstein cites one person because there probably only was one person to cite. Anyway, so but this is this is something as well, right? So it's someone who knows everything, whatever it is. But you want to be able to, what I'm trying to say here is lift out and do this at maybe at the network scale, right? There might be a Supreme Court decision that's cited somewhat here, but then this next level cites it, indirectly through two steps, and it becomes an important building block. All right. So importance, very, very difficult thing to measure, right? Importance is just like what is that? How do you quantify that? There's old work by Peter Behrman at Columbia where they looked at responses to, maybe I've said this, to surveys of what's important, right? So asking people a whole bunch of things, how many cats do you have in your house? It's a social survey thing, how much time do you spend, playing sports, whatever, right? Just trying to find out things about people's lives. And then they have one set of questions there, whom do you speak with about important topics, right? And so a number of people would put no one, right, which is a bit sad, but they're married and they have friends of it. So it's sort of this awkward thing to look through because there's that. But then they also ask them they started to ask what's important, right? That wasn't in the survey, so they go out and they ask people what's important. And so that scopes from like the heat death of the universe back to my cat is a little bit sick, right? So it's just sort of all over the place. This is not like what's important to you just doesn't work as a question. So it's a bit of a shame. So we're gonna have to quantify this. I should say that. You would think that would work. Oh, it's probably Behrman. What happened? What did it do? What's that? Oh. Yeah, the titles are sort of like the word from Colbert sometimes. They should be, yeah. When they're going well, they say they're total, yeah, okay. They should have that quality, and I apologize if they don't. Anyway, so now the next one's going to be incredibly boring, I'm sure. So, yeah, see? Okay, damn it. So this is the term, right? Centrality that people have used. And a lot of this work originally comes from graph theorists, right? The original people connected to social network people were graph theorists, right? And mathematicians. Which is cool. Why doesn't this work? Oh, because UVM's trying to install more software. Okay, great. Yeah. So there's this kind of idea, right? So the framing straight away says they're central in some sense of the network, and the idea is they're right kind of in the middle, right? So this term gets used. They might not really be. I mean, you may have two big networks and then a bridge, this translator or someone who's in the middle, and they're really important. I mean, they're sort of central, but yeah. Anyway, so it comes from social networks literature. So lots of flavors. Some are dynamic based on like real traffic or some sort of ad hoc made up kind of idea of traffic on the network, so we'll see that. And you can kind of, I think, as we go through this, think about they're doing this because they can, right? So something like, let's make traffic be like every node passes a message to every other node, or think of it perhaps like that, right? And they do it along the shortest paths. So somehow we know all the shortest paths, and somehow their message is being passed, right? So that's sort of like, we can make it up, and then we can look at how many messages hit each place, right? And then we'll have some measure of importance, which ones have the biggest load. But that's not it's obviously not a real dynamical thing. So we're going to look at a few of these. Yeah, this will be fun. Okay, and as I said, we'll get to communities later on, and it's an important but not. There are so many competing methods, it's insane. It's just hundreds, thousands of papers with thousands of citations, this giant field that we'll sort of talk about. And where we are now is, you have your tools in whatever, Python, or maybe something like some of the graph visualization things. You just basically push a button, but you need to know which thing you're using, right? I mean, we don't expect you to create these things at this point, but it's still, wow, people are still arguing.